do I have the bandwidth to do my work, and do I feel better? Am I better in my space because I'm not in pain? And then when guys start reporting that back to me, I know that we're on the right track, and we're doing the right things for them.
One of the unique aspects of your work is you get to work with very high level performers. And so typically the people that I'm talking to often are working with people who are on the sickness end of this sickness fitness spectrum, but you're kind of on the other end. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the general qualities that you are looking for when you're working with some of these people that are on high levels of performance in the physical world.
Yeah. So really, I think it comes back to something that you said when you talked about discipline, and getting people to have the discipline to stick to the plan, and to stick with something that's going to help improve them. A lot of people ask me, well, what is the best training program for me to be on? There's CrossFit, and then there's Mountain Tough, and then there's June Jones, and there's all these different things out there. If I go on YouTube or heaven forbid Instagram and try to like follow somebody on there, I'm going to get so just inundated with so much stuff. And I say to people, I say, you know what? Like, the best workout plan is the one you're going to stick to. And it's the one you're going to enjoy, and it's the one you're going to do over and over again. And it's the same thing with your nutrition plan. Like, it's going to be the one that you're able to be disciplined enough to stick to, and that you can follow up with. And so, like, when I look at our guys, and when I think about working with them, and the work that I do with them, and the thing that I most want to see from them is the discipline to show up, the discipline to do the work that's necessary. And we don't have to have every day like that. And that's really the hardest thing when I come into this space, because these guys have been such high performers for so long, and the environments are so competitive that they feel like when they go into the gym that they have to like leave, like crawling out of the gym with their tongue hanging out. And I said, guys, like, we don't have to be there. Like, we have to, like, I'm a big proponent, especially with our aging population, guys of minimal effective dose. Like, I would rather have you show up every day and just try to be 1% better every day. Like, not kill yourself every day and go as hard as you can to where you feel broken when you walk out of the gym, but you just move the needle 1% every day. At the end of the year, we're going to be 365% better than we were a year ago. So that's the first component. The second component is making sure that we feel like we're ready to fight a war when we walk out of the gym, not like we just went through one. I work with people that have duty cycles, and that they might be called to go out and do something highly demanding for long periods of time that was going to require not just physical, but mental acuity, and a high level of stress. And so it's incumbent upon me, as the person who's running their physical readiness and training is stress. Right. And that's all, like, if you really think about, like, at the root of what a strength coach is, it is a stress applicator. Like, my responsibility is to apply stress in such a way that the body adapts in the form that in the way that we are looking for it to adapt. So I have to understand, like, what it is, what the training effect I'm looking to elicit is. Is it speed? Is it strength? Is it power? Am I trying to improve aerobic capacity? Am I trying to improve VO2 max? What do those things look like? And how do I push those buttons within the body to get the athlete to go where I want them to go? But then I have to do that in such a way that if in 12 hours from now the phone rings and I have to go out the door, I can still do my job at a high level, and I'm not a liability to myself, to my teammate, to the nation, by going out and doing something, but being unprepared. And so I really try to just push that, like, let's just do a little bit every day, as opposed to trying to do these big lurching movements or try to have these big like events that we're gonna push towards. A little bit each day goes a long way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I have a little bit of background in CrossFit. So as we talk about this idea of training intentionally, it takes me back to a conversation between Josh Bridges, who was a Navy SEAL who went on to be a very high-level competitive CrossFitter, and Matt Fraser, who was 5-time champion, arguably one of the most fittest human beings ever, right? And I'm not getting into that debate today with anybody. So if anybody's listening and they're like, well, this guy, just go do your own research. My point here is that Josh Bridges was training with Matt Fraser, and they were like, we're going to do 5 rounds of this just grueling workout, right? It's going to just crush us. And they got about 3 rounds in, and Josh is a Navy SEAL. His mentality is you don't ever stop. You keep going till the mission's finished. He gets about 3 rounds in, looks over, and Matt is just toweling off. He's done. He's like, he's wiping his hands clean. And Josh is like, what are you doing? We're not even finished with this workout. And Matt's like, I got out of it what I wanted today. Like, I got my stressor, right? The adaptational response is there. And that's when Josh was like, oh, like this is training. This is what this is about. Like this is an actual sport now. This isn't just crush ourselves in the gym. And so the lesson there that I think everybody can apply is be intentional with your training. I have so many executives who are like, "Well, I want to get back to what I was lifting in high school where I could deadlift 500 pounds." And I'm like, "Dude, you lift a laptop for your job. What do you need to lift 500 pounds for? How about we don't pull our back trying to relive the glory days?" And so I think you're right on the money when you say like being intentional with that small minimum effective dose is so powerful.
Yeah, and you mentioned there something that I think is super important in relation to just moving the needle a little bit. I think that's where we need to be, and being super deliberate and intentional about everything we do, having a reason, having a purpose, and then taking the ego out of it. I mean, Matt Frazier was able to do that. Our company actually does a lot of work, and I do workshops with Matt, advanced workshops for some folks, and being able to see like what he knows and his understanding of the sport really is super impressive. And so like when it comes to being able to take your ego out of the equation and say, okay, this has been enough. I don't need to do that 500-pound deadlift or whatever it is. Really, what is strong enough for me? What is good enough for me? And taking the ego out of it makes a huge difference. Helps keeps us healthy. Like that's one thing. Like I have zero patience or tolerance for is injuries as a part of or as a result of the training process. And so like how can we keep people healthy? Not only get them healthy, but keep them healthy. So I can't afford one of my guys to get hurt. We're limited in numbers as it is. So like taking the ego out of it as rapidly as possible is so important. And when you get, it's really interesting to watch, especially like some of these high level operators that like the one that you just described, Navy SEAL type guys, when you watch that light kind of go on in them and they're like, oh, you're a badass, dude. Like you don't need to go prove you're more of a badass in the gym every day. You've already done that in a way that lifting, like there's no weight that you're going to lift that's going to outshine some of the things that you've done in your life. So let's maybe take a step back from that, like play into the ego. Like you are what you believe you are. You don't have to keep proving it. Let's get you healthy. Let's get you feeling good so that when you have to go do that thing again, you do it even better. And most importantly, and this is like where I really hook a lot of these dudes is you're coming home, man. Like you're coming home, brother. You're coming home to the dinner table. You're coming home to your wife. You're coming home to your kids. You're coming home to your husband. And like that starts to like get lights to like fire for these people. And that really resonates with them because nobody says like, I don't want to do that in this space. Like people want to come home. They want to be there for their families. So what's the best way that we can do that? Let's take care of our bodies. Let's take care of our minds.
So I think you touched on such a powerful thing, that idea of consistency, that idea of training with intention. I always used to say, let's do today what gets us to tomorrow's workout. So if you got a scale, that's like, should I go down in weight? Well, what's going to get you to tomorrow's workout, right? And so I think that's powerful in terms of what we need to see in order for us to get to that fitness side of the space. Are there, Frank, any metrics or qualities that are specific to performance that you're looking for when you're training with your guys? And I know that can vary on a lot of different factors depending on who you're training and what their outcome goals are. But are there any things that you're looking for that let you know, okay, we're moving the needle forward?
Yeah, I go with pain. It's interesting. Like I used to be big, bench, squat, clean, deadlift. What's your 40 time? What's your vertical? Like there are all these numbers that we looked at. We would use GPS and we'd look at player load and we'd utilize heart rate technology and look at cardiac load and we'd look at force plate data and we'd talk about ground reaction forces. So there was all these metrics that we looked at. And when I came to this space, guys want to get stronger. They want this, they want that. But really, like for me, the metric that I look at is, am I being successful? Am I doing a great job here? Is when guys are telling me like, man, I'm not in pain anymore. Like, and there's so many of these bodies that are broken from 15, 20, 25 years of going down range, Iraq, Afghanistan, some of these other places, or just working in the public safety sector, fire police. And there's injuries and there's wear and tear on the body. So if you start demonstrating to these folks like how they can take better care of themselves, simple basic maintenance things, like a lot of the stuff that I do with my guys, I like to think of it as like user's manual for the human body. Like how do we work on resolving back pain? How do we work on resolving hip pain? How do we work on resolving shoulder pain, neck pain, these types of things? What are some basic tools that I can give you in your toolbox every day? Like we send them and spend millions of dollars teaching these guys how to use high tech and expensive tools to go down range and do their jobs. Let's take some time and give them tools to work on their primary operating system, their brains and bodies, to make them be able to go out and do the things that they need to do. And so for me, pain is really one of those metrics as far as like, do I have the bandwidth to do my work, and do I feel better? Am I better in my space because I'm not in pain? And then when guys start reporting that back to me, I know that we're on the right track and we're doing the right things for them.
That's tremendous. Do you use any sort of quantitative data to track that, or is it more just a self-reporting kind of thing?
It's self-reporting, and I don't have like a database. It's actually a great idea. I probably should kind of on a day-to-day check-in, like where guys can kind of check in and say, scale of 1 to 5, 5 you feel great, 1 you feel like trash. Like, where do you feel? And that could be something that we track over time to, what's your mood? What was your sleep like? Like that would be a great idea. A lot of those things are just conversations that you have as guys walk into the gym, like, hey, how are you? How you feeling? And then your coach's intuition in the back is running, and you're thinking, okay, yeah, like, or that guy doesn't look right, or something doesn't look right with him, or you can just tell when something's off with your guys because you just know them. So yeah, that's but I like that. I think that would be something good that we can look at doing. I'm gonna take that away from today.
I love it. I love it. Always a nugget. So there's two things that I would do kind of in the same realm. One is we used an app called Train Heroic, and they actually had built into this system a survey at the beginning, like how's your energy, and then how are you feeling in terms of prep. And so you could kind of use that as data to determine, are you overtraining, undertraining, that kind of stuff, which I loved. The other thing was I created an assessment that we do once every quarter, and it would measure endurance, stamina, strength, power, all the 10 aspects of fitness that the Dynamax guys came up with. And then we would also do a movement assessment mobility. And it was kind of an amalgamation of the FMS, functional movement screen, along with some other things that I thought were a little bit more vital to understand. But we would do everybody would test each other. It'd be a group day. I'd teach them how to do the scales and the metrics and the measurements, and then we would test each other, and then we could see progress in terms of functional movement. And one of the things I would do is, similar to the FMS, if there's pain, it's a 0. There's no question about it, right? If you're in pain, doesn't matter if you can move full range of motion, you're getting a 0. Then there would be aspects of, if you could do the movement in with 1 rep, good range of motion, then can you do 10 reps consistently with no faults, right? So then mechanics, then consistency within those mechanics. And then we would add weight to determine whether or not they could do the same movement with good form consistently under load. So those were kind of some of the tools that I used, but I was interested to hear. And I think really more powerfully is the coach's ability to assess it in the moment, to look at your clients and say, okay, we need to do this differently today.
Yeah, and our company has a movement screen that they've developed that we use with tactical athletes, and I do utilize that as a source of information, but just I was thinking more like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think all those things are great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when you think of this spectrum that we're talking about of sickness and fitness, and you're asking yourself, how would I label this thing? If I was trying to explain to somebody, okay, you're at the highest level of fitness you can be, and that looks like this. What kind of term would you use to explain that?
Um, Man, that's a great question. I just like I just love the idea of being fit or being I guess ready is kind of like a word that I use is ready. Like ready for life, ready for the world. Man, it's kind of like are you ready to save your family from danger? Are you ready to push your car out of the middle of an intersection if it stalls? Are you ready to hustle up the stairs or run if you need to be able to run, or fight if you need to be able to fight? So I guess like ready would be the word that I would use, and ready for what? Ready for anything? Like ready for life?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Speaking of CrossFit, we're probably going to have to get royalties at some point. They talk about the known and the unknowable. And I think that that's just a really good the topic that comes up again and again on this podcast is the idea of resiliency. And that's in terms of your financial health, your emotional health. Are you resilient? And I think to even define that a little bit more, it's the capacity to handle unfortunate or unforeseen external circumstances and come back to a neutral state, right? Like, so something happens and all of a sudden you have to run 2 miles. Can you do that without some sort of high level deleterious effects when that comes? So it sounds similar to kind of what you're suggesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
That's great. So let's take a look at the other side. So when you start off in the world that we live in, you start off working with all sorts of people, right? And as time goes on, I speak to so many students. I used to teach health and kinesiology at Purdue University, and everybody wanted to work with college level athletes. D1 college, that's where I want to go. And I'd always be like, well, why not professional? And I think they just didn't think they could hit that level, but D1 seemed more, ascertainable. But when you first start off working with people, you work with anybody. And to be honest, I prefer working with a 70-year-old guy who has 2 knee replacements because he's willing to work. But when you think of the people that are on the sickness end of that spectrum, what are some of the things that you're noticing about them and their physical health that they're maybe lacking that you would want to improve?
I think tools, knowledge are the things that I find people struggle with. Like our Eat, Sweat, Thrive model at O2X, I think is extremely valuable, but it's also extremely basic. Like when I recruit strength coaches or other people to come in and be a part of the company, we have a textbook that comes along with our model. None of it is anything that you would open up and look at and be like, holy cow, like this is really groundbreaking stuff, or this is like really something that's pioneering a change in how we think about human performance. It is tools that people who work in these spaces don't know. And so you said something a little bit ago talking about the guy, the office executive that wants to deadlift 500 pounds because that's what he did in high school. When I sit down and talk with some of these, 45, 50-year-old people that are living and operating in these spaces, and they haven't been training, or they have been training, and I ask them, like, what does your workout look like? Well, I'm just doing what I did when I was in high school, or I'm just doing what I did when I was in college, because they don't know any different. They don't know any better. Or in the army, like you go out and watch PT, and then you say, okay, that was all right. And then you go up to the E5 that's running that, and you say, why did you run that program? Like, what was the intent behind today's session? They say, well, sir, that's just what my first sergeant did when he ran PT for me. And so it's like the lack of knowledge and the lack of tools that people have, and then the overabundance on the other end, which makes it so unpalatable for a person who doesn't know. It's very intimidating if I go online. I was like, oh, I just want to understand a little bit better how to eat, right? Like, let's talk about nutrition. Like, whoa, you want to talk about like getting into some dark stuff on the web and like some real like daggers being thrown at people. Like, just talk about like paleo or talk about the carnivore diet or the Mediterranean diet. And people like literally like there's so much dogma behind it, when in reality the truth lies in a lot of different places and in a lot of different ways for what works for different people. And so being able to arm people with knowledge and tools so they can help themselves, I think is the biggest thing that we can do for them. Like they just don't know any better. And so I think when a lot of times when people are sick or when people are not fit or they're not ready or they make poor decisions, they just don't know any better. Like you walk through the grocery store and you just kind of push your cart around and you look at what people's carts look like in relation to their bodies and you're like, I can tell what you're trying to do, but you're off base. Or like maybe I'm trying to it's funny when I see like the cart that's full of frozen pizzas and chips and stuff, but then there's diet soda in there, and it's like you think that you're doing something to help yourself there when in reality you're not. Or a lot of the even the food that's sold as healthy food, it's got so much sugar and so much artificial crap in it, and people just don't know. And so, like giving them the knowledge, cutting through the misinformation, the disinformation, the advertisements, and the brain fog that you get from the internet, I think makes a huge difference. And then when people are able to kind of parse through that and find that there is a way for them to get there, it makes that much clearer. And then to your point a little bit ago, they're so much more motivated. Like I love the guys I work with because nobody's there. Nobody shows up this morning because somebody made them. Like there's nobody there on a compulsory status. They're there because they want to be there. When you work with athletes, particularly college athletes, a lot of them don't want to be there. Like they are at the strength training session because if they're not, they got to do up downs or they got to do 300-yard shuttles or they're going to get their scholarship pulled. Like, and that's frustrating. After a lot of time, like you get tired of working with people that think they know better or they, you care more than they do. I don't have that problem anymore. Like if people don't show up, that's not my issue. Like they're all grown-ups, they're all professionals. If they show up, they get my very best effort every day because I know they're there because they want to be. And that's incredibly liberating as a coach to be with people and work with people that have an intense desire to really improve themselves. And that's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And I couldn't agree more with you, Frank. I think one of the reasons people want to work with those D1 athletes so much is because they think that there's going to be more motivation to succeed and they're not going to have to deal with people being not unmotivated. And just like you've said, and what I have noticed is like motivation will wax and wane with every group that you're going to work with. And so it's not really so much, can I find a group that's motivated so I don't have to deal with it? It's instead recognizing your self-worth as a coach doesn't get tied up to whether or not your athletes want to work out. That's their business. You show up and do the best that you can, and the rest will come. The other part of it is just recognizing everybody's different. So some people are going to show up and want to do it. Other people aren't. And you got to realize that you are going to be a little bit of a motivator, but you can't pull them to it. You gotta help them see it sometimes. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of how we start to measure some of these things that you work with your clients. So obviously, one of the goals of the podcast here is to do interviews to better understand how people can determine where they're at in their fitness and see where they want to go. So obviously a big part of this is motivation and discipline and consistency and knowledge and all of those things. When we start to think about ways in which we can determine how people are improving their physical wellness, what are some ways that you might use to help a client see that progress happening in a more quantitative way?
Yeah, I love being able to show people body composition. I think that that's a super powerful tool. If you have access to a DEXA, if you have access to a bod pod, I would stay away from the bioelectrical impedance type pieces of equipment. The data on those isn't particularly strong unless you have a very advanced type unit, which are very expensive. And you don't have to do it every week or every 3 weeks. I mean, it's something that really, I think a 6-month checkup on those things is great. So being able to look at that, being able to look at VO2 max and see improvement in VO2 max, I think is huge and important. And then just kind of looking at day-to-day numbers and basic strength movements. And for everybody, that's going to be a little bit different. Maybe it's a deadlift, maybe it's a squat, maybe it's a leg press, maybe it's a dumbbell bench press, but finding little things to say, hey, 3 weeks ago we were here on this movement, now we're here, and being able to demonstrate improvement overall in those things is huge. And so, looking at body composition, so important for longevity. VO2 max, super important for longevity. The health of your muscular system, and you'll look at that in your body composition, but you'll also be able to gauge that by the improvement in overall strength is huge. And so really looking at those things and being able to demonstrate that to people, I think is a great way to keep it simple, but move the ball forward with them.
Yeah, that's great. One of the questions I have for you, and maybe this is a little bit more personal, seeing your personal opinion on this. When you have a client who says something along the lines of, I don't do deadlifts because deadlifts are bad for your back. How do you approach somebody in that regard? What is your input to them?
So my favorite one is squatting, right? Like I don't squat because squats are bad for my knees. I say, okay, did you poop today? And they'll be, oh yeah, of course I did. Okay, cool. Well, you squatted to get down onto the toilet and you squatted to get back off the toilet, or you got in out of your car today, right? Like you're performing a squat to do. So kind of demonstrating ways to them that those movements, and I don't love the term functional, but like the ways that these movements are functional, like you are doing them on a day-to-day basis. And maybe the movement in and of itself isn't bad. Maybe the way you're doing the movement is what's creating pain or creating you to have that. So let's take a look at that. And let me video you doing it. And then I can show you potentially where you're doing it wrong. And then I can show you what it looks like, right? I can demonstrate myself doing it. I can show you a video of someone else doing it. And then we can work to improve that technique. I'm a huge technician when it comes to being in the weight room. It's the very first thing I teach. When we bring anybody in, we start everything off body weight, get them to move within their body first, and then we can start adding load. And so, like, I think demonstrating the fact that you're doing a lot of these movements already. And so maybe a deadlift isn't a barbell deadlift. Maybe it's picking up a kettlebell off the floor. Like if it's a female or a older client, they say, well, I don't deadlift. It's like, okay, well, do you pick your grandchild up off the floor? Do you pick groceries up off the ground? When a package gets left on your doorstep, do you kick that down the stairs and then find a way to get it? Or, like, how are you getting that up off the ground? Well, I bend over and pick it up. It's like, great, you're deadlifting. Now let's get you to do it in a better way. So you're not using your back, you're using your legs. And so if you can draw that line for them and kind of make that connection and say, this is something you're already doing. We just want you to do it better and move better while you're doing it so that you don't have that pain and don't have that fear of injury. I think we're able to eliminate those things. And I've not had any issue with somebody giving me pushback on that. A lot of times there's so much great like tools in gyms, like machines and those types of things that you can put people on to get them comfortable doing things and then kind of progress them, or just finding ways. Picking up a kettlebell off the floor is pretty easy. Like a light kettlebell, can you bend over and pick that up? Can I put you in positions to where you're doing that? The trap bar is great for that. And then maybe I don't need to do a barbell deadlift. I really hate getting caught up in the nuances of the move. You have to back squat in order to be squatting. Bullshit. You don't have to back squat. I can goblet squat. I can front squat. I can Zercher squat. I can do bodyweight squats. There's a million different ways that I can train that pattern. I can do single leg squats. Like what if a guy has a spondy? What if a guy has multiple levels of disc replacement or disc issues in their back? Are you going to actually load that athlete and say, well, this is the only way you can do it? I mean, we have a belt squat in our gym for those guys in particular. And for the guys that don't like that, we'll do bodyweight squats, or we'll do tempo squats. Put them on a slant board and put a weight in their hand and have them go down on a 5 count, a 6 count, an 8 count, a 10 count. There's a ton of different ways that we, again, being able to understand how to stress the body to elicit the response you're looking for is vital. It can't just be bars and more weight, bars and more weight, bars and more weight. I think people that think in that lane are clumsy coaches, and they need to get out of their own way with that. There are a lot of, like, one of my favorite strength coaches that I ever followed coming up used to say, many roads lead to Rome. And that's the truth. And I tell people all the time, it's exercise science, not exercise fact. Just because that exercise or that pattern works for that person doesn't mean that it's the way that you have to do it. The patterns are important, absolutely. Squat pattern, pull pattern, push pattern. We need to be able to train those things. But what are ways that we can get there that work for that individual? Man, your imagination is the limit for that. And finding ways that get your clients or your operators or your athletes to be able to do that as effective and safely and efficiently as possible, that's good coaching.
So well put. So well put. I think what always was powerful and beneficial for me was to get people away from the idea that an exercise is the tool that you're using, right? Like a deadlift is you have a bar in your hand and you blah, 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 right? It's getting back to, we're hinging. We're hinging from the hip. And then you ask yourself 2 questions. 1, where do you want to be with your hinge, right? Like, I want to be able to pick up my grandkids without hurting my back. Okay, there's my goal. And then where are you at today? And then your job as a coach is to bridge those 2 things. And it can be done, like you said, with a barbell, with a blah, 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 blah. But that's not the point. And if you're selling yourself as an expert because you have access to cool equipment, well, then you're no different than anybody who can buy that equipment. Instead, your power comes from being able to see those 2 things very clearly, or helping your client see it, because really that's what matters most, is that they can see it. And then asking yourself, how do we bridge that gap? And that's where the power comes from in coaching.
Well, and there are too many experts, right? Like, in order to be classified as an expert in society, you have to know more than 90% of the population. Well, that's not hard to do when it comes to things like the gym. I mean, I was at the bank yesterday and the teller was complaining to somebody about how sore she was. And so it was taking a while for them to process what I was doing. And I said, "Oh, so you worked out yesterday? Tell me about that. Like, what happened?" And it was like she was there with her friend whose boyfriend's brother was a trainer and taught him how to do these. And I was like trying to follow the string, and it was like, holy cow, this guy who isn't even the coach became the expert because he trained with a guy that was the expert. Like, no wonder why your body's hurting, because nobody knows what's going on. We're just doing what somebody else showed somebody else to do. And that's
Sure.
scary to me and sad, but the expert thing, I think that's overrated. And I'm very cautious about experts because they tend to be dangerous. They have just enough knowledge and just enough information to be dangerous with.
Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, what matters to me is, do you have a sincere and just deep seated drive to help other people? And are you going to do whatever it takes to do that to the best of your abilities, including admitting that you don't know everything? And so if there's something that you don't know, you're not going to tell somebody about it.
And unfortunately, like, you got to get to be our age before you're willing and have the ego to do that, right? Like, when I was 25 years old, I knew everything. I was the smartest coach in the country.
Well,
And
next
now
to
at
me,
44, I know that I don't know anything and that I need to do research, and that the best answer I can give somebody if they ask me a question I'm not sure on is, you know what, I don't know, but I'm going to get you the answer. And I think, again, like, shameless plug for O2X. And one thing that I think our company does better than anybody in the human performance space for tactical athletes is we have over 400 subcontractors that are bridged onto these contracts that we work. So if somebody comes to me with a nutrition, a sleep, a resiliency, hell, even a strength and condition question that I don't have the answer to, I can pick up the phone and call a PhD sleep specialist, a registered dietitian, and get answers from them for these people. Or I can connect those two and say, hey, I'm stepping out of this because this is a little bit private and a little bit personal. I don't need to be the bridge here. Let me put you two together and get you the help that you need. And so, like, that is such a relief to me when someone comes to me and says, hey, Frank, I've got X, Y, and Z. And I don't have to go, well, you should probably see somebody about that. It's like, I just did come to see somebody about that. Now what am I supposed to do? I don't have to do that. I can pick up the phone and get help for these guys. And that's so empowering to be able to, like, go to work every day and know that if somebody comes to you with something, I can say I don't know, and then I can go get them help that they need.
Yeah. And I think that is the authentic means by which people are truly looking for help. That's one of the reasons I'm doing these expert interviews, is because I realized I didn't have all the answers and I needed to talk to some really smart people. And I've been a coach for 14 years, a lot of that in the physical wellness space. And I still learn. I mean, Emerson said it best. Every person is my superior in some way. And in that, I learn from them. And so I think being able to have the tools necessary to say, I don't know, but here's some people who do, and actually look for those people and be willing to sacrifice a little bit of your bread to somebody else because it's going to serve somebody, is phenomenal. And none of this has anything to do with actual physical fitness, but we're turning this into a coaching clinic, which I think is phenomenal because we do need more coaches that can do the things that we do out there.
But I think too, like, it helps people recognize and realize what a good coach is. Like, I'm sure you have a ton of coaches that listen to this, but then to, the person who's more on the sickness end of that spectrum and needs help, they're going to start soliciting and trying to find help. So what are some things that I need to listen to? If I ask you a question and you don't know the answer to it, what are you going to tell me? Like, I think that's a very fair question to ask a coach or an advisor or mentor, any type of person that you're going to for help, because finding those things out is vital to your health and your success.